I'm going to cry. When she was 14, was kidnapped, prostituted on the strip in some of the major hotels. And being able to go through the process of getting her a T visa, getting her mom a T visa and her brother a T visa, these all put them on the path so that they could later get a green card, but also help get them services. They invite me into the very hardest parts of their life. That's really the only reason you go see a lawyer. Something's gone wrong by the time you need a lawyer. How much of your life do you want to give to, I'm going to wait? Or are you just okay saying, I'm never going to get my papers?
Seguidores de Prensa Arizona, bienvenidos a nuestro podcast y hoy vamos a platicar con una abogada de inmigración que se ha hecho muy, pero muy conocida y vamos a estar platicando sobre muchos temas de mucho interés. Así que hoy le vamos a dar la bienvenida a Hilary Walsh de New Frontier Immigration Law. Bienvenida.
Gracias thanks for having me.
So, vamos a hacer esta entrevista en inglés y van a tener por ahí los subtítulos, así que pues vamos rápidamente a lo que es la información. So, in Arizona, many detention centers like Eloy and Florence and soon Marana are run by private companies under these government contracts. Given the reports of poor conditions, medical neglect, and even deaths in these facilities, what is your perspective in their current state?
So the goal of this administration has been to deport people, but the corporations want to detain people. And because they get paid per person per bed, it's like a hotel for them. It's like a business. And so the cheaper the conditions, the more money they make in terms of profit. The more full the detention center, the more money they make. And I had a client who he was detained for over 4 years in Eloy during the last administration. And then I just got him out 2 weeks ago. He was detained for 7 months. And he said that the conditions were so much worse this time, all the way down to the food. They rotate between pasta and boiled potatoes. So every other meal is pasta or boiled potato, and the potato is cold every other meal. And so why would we do this? Because pasta and potatoes are the absolute cheapest food that you can make other than rice. And potatoes have at least some nutritional value to them. But when my clients get out of the detention center, they haven't had any fruit or vegetables, anything that is fresh for however long they've been detained. Why is that? Money. These companies are here to make a profit.
Do you know how much are they paying for each bed?
The last time I did research on this, it was about $170 per person per day that the government pays to the corporation. Now, these are people who sometimes they sleep on the floor. They have like a little cot that's on the floor, and calling it a cot makes it seem like there's a mattress. It's like you're laying on the ground with those plastic type blankets that you see when runners cross the finish line and they put that foil blanket around them. That is often what is used. These things cost pennies, but the more people they cram in here, the more money they make. We should all be disgusted that my tax money, your tax money, a 15-year-old making minimum wage working at McDonald's, their tax money is all going to fund this. And these corporations have reported on their annual earnings because they're publicly traded. We see how much money they're making, the largest profits in their history.
So that was going to be my next question. How do you feel about these detention centers being run for profit with taxpayer money, and how does this affect the detainees' rights?
So when the detention center is motivated to keep them locked up because they get paid, and the government right now, the main emphasis of the government is to deport people, the two are working hand in hand. And all these companies they're now lobbying, and they want immigration reform. They want mass deportations. But they don't really want those things. They just want the profit. So it is open air corruption. It's ironic for me. how a year ago I couldn't have imagined the corruption was always there. These corporations, Core Civic has been running the detention center in Eloy and in Florence and before La Palma. The government has been running many of these prisons for a long time. The corruption has been there. But now it is the whole government is behind the corruption. So it's no different than modern day slavery.
Wow. Many immigrants fear deportation, lack of housing, and limited job opportunities. In your Arizona practice, what's the most common fear you see among your clients, and how do you help them face them and overcome it?
Mm-hmm. The biggest fear is that they have to raise their hand and identify that in order to get their green card, in order to get on the right track. They have to raise their hand and say, I'm here without permission. And then they have to trust that the government will do what it says that it's going to do. Rather than I raise my hand and now I'm trapped, like a bear trap almost. And I think that's the hardest part because I have to trust the same thing. I have to trust that the government will do what it says that it will do and not trap my clients. But right now, I have low trust. My clients have low trust. So we have to take very specific steps to protect the community. Otherwise, we just stay living in fear. And my whole goal is to help people not live with that much fear.
So that happened a lot with DACA and DAPA on those times,
Yeah,
right?
it really did. In 2012, they came out and said, don't worry, we're creating this new program for young people. Tell us everything about you, where you live, where you went to school, where you're working, and we're going to give you papers. But you know what? They did do it. They did, and they have honored it for the most part. And I think that's a big difference between the times we're in now and perhaps the times that we were in then. But it is very, very challenging right now because you don't know where the trap is laid.
So what's happening now with DACA recipients?
So DACA recipients have, for the most part, in my experience, remained in purgatory. So they have their work permit, but they still have no path toward residency unless they marry a citizen, or sometimes they can petition for themselves through their background, like their professional achievements. But for the most part, they're still stuck with no way forward and hopefully no way back. I have had a few clients who have DACA who've gotten put in removal proceedings for absolutely no reason. And now we're just fighting to get those cases closed again.
What is your recommendation for DACA recipients?
I think that it's to kind of stay out of trouble. I think it's like the recommendation for everyone is kind of just stay out of trouble. I work with a lot of DACA recipients who they have their master's degree or they have a bachelor's, teachers, nurses, doctors, professionals, and they're able to petition for themselves through their skill set, not through a marriage, but through their skill set. And that has been great for being able to help DACA recipients be able to go from where they are, so accomplished, so talented, and be able to go ahead and get their green card.
Now that you speak about the marriage, it's not that easy now to get a green card or become a U.S. citizen through that route, isn't it?
I think it's about as easy as it ever was. It's not gotten harder in my experience. So I think that there's just in every immigration option, it's like the administration is taking a big magnifying glass to everything. So it's not that one thing has gotten harder than the other. It's that everything has become more challenging. So we have all of our marriage cases still getting approved just fine.
So what is your recommendation to the community, those immigrants who are not trusting the system right now, and they prefer to remain in the dark, and in order to not get deported? So what will you tell them?
I think number one is I've never been in that person's shoes before. So the first thing I have to say is it's easy for me to give advice and say, you should go for it. You should raise your hand and you should move forward. The reality is I've never been in that situation personally. So it's difficult for me to really tell people what to do. But what I can say is I've been through this before as an attorney. I was an attorney here in Arizona last time Trump was president. And people wanted to wait for a new administration. And we got a new administration. We got Biden. We all thought that Biden was going to do something and really deliver for the immigrant community. And he did not. Everything he tried to do got blocked by the courts. Now today, and by Congress. Yes. So, I mean, there was no forward movement. And then I think he just really, their administration just kind of gave up on things. And then boom, here we are. And so I think that people get in their head that I just have to survive this 4 years, but it becomes a lifetime of surviving another 4 years. And what I have to ask people is, how much of your life do you want to give to, I'm going to wait? Or are you just okay saying, I'm never going to get my papers? Because you have to start at some point. One of my friends says it's like winning the lottery. To win the lottery, you have to buy a ticket. You can't keep waiting for the big thing to come if you don't get in there and give it a try. So I recognize that this is something I've not had to do, but I do encourage people to talk to someone they feel comfortable with, feel confident that they're giving them good advice, and to go for it. Waiting rarely helps you in immigration.
Okay. You have represented cases in the U.S. Supreme Court and various courts of appeals. Can you describe one notable case that has an impact for your clients?
One case, actually yesterday, is a wonderful thing that happened yesterday. So I have to take you back 7 years, one client's life. 7 years ago, this client came to me and he had a different lawyer at the time and he had been ordered removed. The judge down here in Phoenix said, your case is denied. You need to leave. You have 30 days to either appeal or leave the country. So he came to me and I said, we should appeal. The issue in his case that we ended up appealing all the way to the Ninth Circuit and we won, and we made precedent. We made law for everybody in the whole Ninth Circuit. So thousands and thousands of people, was that this client, he had a DUI and he got sentenced to 179 days in jail. 180 days and he loses any immigration benefits called 42B, cancellation of removal. So he could not be in there for 180 days. His lawyer did a good job and got him 179 days. That's all he needed. But his 179th day happened on the 4th of July. And so he had to stay an extra weekend before he got let out of the jail. So he was actually there for 183 days. Mm-hmm. So I argued and we won that the fact that he was in prison for 183 days doesn't mean that he was sentenced to 183 days. He was only sentenced to 179. So anyway, we won his case. We had to argue it and argue it and argue it. We made new law. This undocumented man who dropped out of middle school, came to the United States illegally, now made law in the United States. And today, actually yesterday, we shredded all of his documents from his immigration court case because I got that whole case terminated. It's gone. It's like it never existed. So it was a 7-year journey to this moment. His daughter started when she was like 4 years old. And I saw her yesterday and she's so tall. She had press-on fingernails. She's such a big girl. But that was a really important case to not only win for him, but it helps all people who are in that situation.
So this has to mean something for the immigrant community that sometimes believe they don't have any rights here.
Yeah. The incredible thing is that everyone has the same rights. Like everyone has the same rights on this side of the border. So you might be at the border and you have limited rights. Even I have less flexibility as a U.S. citizen. I have a little bit less rights when I'm seeking to come into the country. Everybody has a little bit less rights at the border. But once you're on the inside, we all have the same rights. the right to an attorney, the right to fairness, the right to be heard, all of those things, and the right to have the law properly applied to your case.
There's a controversy about due process, mostly in the last year. Mm-hmm. Is there still the due process for everyone?
There's still due process for everyone as long as they're inside the United States. There's cases from the Supreme Court coming out saying if you're within that first few feet inside the United States at the border, you have less rights. But you have full rights once you're fully inside the United States, which is why we have to fight so hard. Because if I, as an attorney, and anyone, any American should want to fight for this. Because if the Constitution says these people have rights, but these people don't, how will we know who has rights and who doesn't? The government's going to go around and pick and choose, and they're going to do it based on who's Latino and who's Black and who's white and who's Asian. And we don't want the law to be applied based on those things. That's why everyone in the U.S. has the same rights.
You seem to be very passionate about what you do. So can you tell us a story about an impact on a family in a case that you have won?
So I go through lots of people, but I'll tell you about my very first client. When I started, I was in law school, and it was for a little girl. She was 14, and her mom was a flight attendant in Germany. They were German. They came to the United States on vacation. They flew on this like in airlines, you can like fly for free as a family. So they flew to the US and ended up loving it and decided to stay. That was when this little girl was about 7 years old. It's no different than families who come on their tourist visa and they decide to stay for whatever reason. This little girl, I was living in Las Vegas at the time. That's where I went to law school. When she was 14, was kidnapped, prostituted on the Strip in some of the major hotels that you and I know by name very, very well. And men were coming and going with her in this hotel as a 14-year-old. By the time that the mom put out, she put wanted posters all over Las Vegas. This mom was desperate to find her little girl. They finally found her. And then someone contacted the law school, and that's where I was able to help as a student attorney with my supervising attorney at the time. I flew to Nashville and I met with this girl. I was 26 at the time. So she was only 12 years. I was only 12 years older than her, which really, when you're that young, you see yourself so much in a 14-year-old child. And being able to go through the process of getting her a T visa, getting her mom a T visa and her brother a T visa, these all put them on the path so that they could later get a green card, but also help get them services. They say that the work that you change lives, and I believe that I get to do that. But really, a lot of times the clients change me because they invite me into some of the hardest parts of their life. I'm going to cry.
It's okay.
Thank you. They invite me into the very hardest parts of their life. That's really the only reason you go see a lawyer. Something's gone wrong by the time you need a lawyer. But they invite me into these precious parts of their life, and they tell me these stories that I have so many clients who will say, I have never told anyone this before. And I'm so fortunate that people trust me with those secrets and that pain. But it changes me, and it makes me love people on a whole other level because I get to say, okay, this terrible thing happened. I think that God's going to help us make something beautiful out of it. Let's see what we can do now. And we take those challenges and we make something beautiful out of it. They have their documents. She's able to get all the things that she needs to be able to help her heal as a child trafficking survivor. So that person changed my life, and I wasn't even a lawyer yet. I was just beginning.
Wow. So you say in your promotional, there's a solution for every problem, and the people must face their fears. So what motivated you to start New Frontier Immigration Law? And how do you stay optimistic in this environment, in these times?
I think that if we firmly believe that there is a solution, it's like at night, we have 12 hours of darkness, and the day we have 12 hours of day. I really believe that everything exists in equal opposites. It's like kind of like the yin yang symbol. I believe that we can find a solution. Sometimes we don't like the solution. Sometimes the solution is you have to live in Mexico for 10 years. But it is a solution, and you don't have to be afraid while you're going through this 10 years of the petition process. True, I really try not to have to tell people that advice because they don't want to have to deal with that, but that is a solution, and we don't have to live in fear while we're going through it. But remaining optimistic, let's be honest, I'm going to go home and be with my family tonight. How on earth would I be a good lawyer in this administration if I went home sad and depressed and full of negativity when I'm going to go home to my family? My job is to keep my mind right, stay aggressive, fight for people, stay positive, find the good in solutions, because when we have optimism, we solve problems differently. And we come to the table and we find amazing things when we come in and say, it's here, I just have to find it.
So you said that living free in the U.S. means having a driver's license, a social security number, and permission to work. Why are these elements so vital for immigrants, and how does your firm help them to achieve this freedom?
I don't wonder what else I said that you're going to quote to me. I love it.
A lot.
A lot. I love it. I say a lot of things. So here we go. So I think that my job is I'm an immigration lawyer. I help people get their papers. But if I don't help you make more money, and if I don't help you have full freedom, have I really helped you? Have I really changed your life? Growing up, we didn't have much money. Me and my family and my husband's family really didn't have a lot of money. He's one of 7 kids, one parent working. His dad immigrated from Canada. So I've seen the life. If we don't help our clients, if I don't help my clients and I don't help the community go from I'm working under the table, getting screamed at, being treated in a discriminatory way, told that if I don't work twice as hard as the American worker next to me, they're going to call ICE on me. And a lot of people experience this. If I don't help them double their income by the time they get their papers, have I really done my job? Because when you have some money, it may not buy you happiness, but it buys you options. It buys you the ability to say, I will not be treated this way. I have a whole new way of looking at myself. And that is like part of the journey toward having documents in your pocket. You get to hold up the middle finger when you need to and say, I'm not going to be treated like this. I am a human who is deserving of everything else anybody else is, because I have that belief about myself. So if you can't drive and you're scared to drive, you act different. You behave different. When you see the police, you're afraid of them. Don't get me wrong. When I see the police, I'm afraid of them too, because usually I'm speeding. But you get the idea where how can you really live this one life if you're afraid to drive and you're always looking over your shoulder? That's not freedom. And that's what I want for people.
So you just brought here two things that happen in the U.S. very commonly, like labor exploitation and sexual exploitation. Tell us more about your experience on those two topics. You just told us about this little girl, 14 years. And what about this labor exploitation?
It's so common when clients say that they've lived in the U.S. for 20 years and they haven't had documents, and then they tell me that they've never had a bad work experience. I almost don't believe them because it's so, so common. I mean, I'm not calling anyone a liar, but I'm just like, really? In 20 years, you've never had one bad work experience? Okay, and I will explain to them, but it's so common that everybody's like, oh yeah, and you name it, we go through them. But I have, in my mind, I remember a very specific conversation with a client where he worked at a junkyard here in Phoenix, and it was a junkyard of cars. And his job was to go through and basically strip the cars for parts and then organize them, and then they were selling those parts. But let's think through junkyard in Phoenix, 130 degrees, 120 degrees, but standing direct. It's an open field, no shade whatsoever throughout the whole day. That kind of heat, and he wasn't allowed to stop for breaks. He wasn't allowed to use the restroom. He had to stay out there and work. So he would drink a water bottle and then pee in the water bottle. And he would keep going. And he ended up having heat stroke and was out there completely blistered when he finally woke up because someone happened to finally, after over a day, go out and look for him. Those are the kind of work conditions. When I asked him at first if he'd ever had a negative work experience in the US, he said no, because he had thought that this was normal. And that's not. And that is a case where like I can just see it in my mind. Like I can see the scene in my mind because he described it so clearly that it really stayed with me. But the same is true for people working on roofs. They're not allowed to come down. They'll take the ladder away where you literally cannot come down, and there will be 15 or 20 men up on a roof doing the same work. And every time this happens, it's always the foreman is a Spanish speaker, but the owner of the company is a non-Spanish speaker. And this stuff is happening right under our noses. Like every time I drive by a house and you don't see anybody, it's ironic. When I was in Mexico this summer, taking a Spanish class, actually, I was driving by and all these men had harnesses on. They were on a roof and they all had harnesses on. And I was like, I have never seen a Mexican man in Phoenix, Arizona on a roof with a harness. But in Mexico, they're treating themselves the proper way. They should have a harness. You might fall and get hurt, and people do. And their employers do nothing about it. Anyway, I could go on and on.
Yeah, and it's the same with the girls at these places. They don't have any documents, and they are sexual harassed, and they are threatened if you don't comply.
Yeah.
I'll call the authorities.
Well, I know that Prensa is associated with Chicanos por la Causa, and I do a lot of volunteer work with De Colores, which is the domestic violence shelter for Chicanos por la Causa. And there was a woman who she came to the United States legally. She was allowed to cross the border during the Biden administration, and she went to a shelter in Texas. And I met her through De Colores. She was trafficked at the shelter. Big pregnant belly, was forced to clean at the shelter that she was living at on this side of the United States. Told she and her little 5-year-old daughter could only eat 1 meal per day. Only spoke to her in Spanish, kept her away from everyone else. Everyone else was speaking English. Can you imagine this poor woman's life? So we're going to do a TV stuff for her, like I did for my very first client. She's here at De Colores now. And it's just a matter of time till all of this works out. But it is so, so common. And this administration and this environment and the money that people are making from it all, it only makes it worse. How is this different than when Sheriff Arpaio was I was going to say president, was here? You know, it really isn't any different.
Well, so there's incredible stories about that. So, but you have an incredible story as well. So you started with like $20 with your. Is there a story like you started with $20 and you had this early struggles to become a lawyer, and how did you succeed?
So I think I succeeded because I saw my baby suffer. And I think that's a big motivation for any parent. But one day I went to pick my son up from daycare, and we didn't have very much money. And I was doing a lot of work out here in the detention center for people for free because I just wanted to do the work so bad. And I hated having to charge people for it. But we had my 4 kids in daycare in the United States, and that's expensive.
Yep.
very expensive. And my husband was in the Air Force at the time, so we had a very specific budget that we were living on. And I went and picked my son up from daycare, and I could hear, before I got into where he was, his little room, I could hear him screaming as I walked up. And I went in, and he was this little baby, kind of army crawling on the floor and rolling over and rubbing his eyes. And the scream was that scream, you know something is wrong. And so I run over and I pick him up, and he smells like bleach water. And so they had mopped the floor with bleach water and then put my infant on the floor, and he got the bleach water in his eyes. And that day, I was like, if I feel this way, where I have to choose between working and where to have my child taken care of, my clients feel that way. I need to help them make more money. But most of all, I really want to succeed. I really want to not have this happen again. I still feel guilty about it. He's my only kid who wears glasses. And sometimes I wonder, was that what happened? You know, I'm sure it wasn't, but that was my drive to succeed. I was not going to have to put my child in that situation again.
So you have an interesting story about your, when you were a teenager. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? So,
like when I was in foster care?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So I was in foster care for a while. It was really a sad deal. You know, my parents were very physically abusive, and that's how they grew up. And then they repeated that. My dad was an alcoholic. He's been sober now for decades. So I'm so proud of him. And I'm a sober girl myself too. I decided that alcohol didn't have a good place in my life anywhere. But I got put in foster care when I was like 15. And that was my first experience going to court, was when I was being taken out of my parents' home. And it was not a good experience. I really don't recommend it for anybody. And that has impacted my relationship with my whole family the rest of my life. And so I see how much one thing can impact. I have lived that experience where one thing with the law or one thing with the family can change everything for decades. And that's why I love being a lawyer and being able to help people. I want to keep families together because that experience took my family apart.
So you had the experience about being a lawyer overseas, working in other countries, and still helping people here in the United States. Can you tell us about it?
So my husband was an F-16 pilot for 20 years, and we got stationed in Japan and in Korea and in England, and then also here in Phoenix and Vegas and in Texas. I didn't work for any law firms when I was outside the U.S. I only worked for immigrants detained here in Arizona. So while I was in Korea, my clients were in Eloy. While I was in England, I had a client who, he was in Nevada. He was in a prison. He was not an immigrant. And he had been in solitary confinement for over 15 years. So a little bitty room, solitary confinement for 15 years straight. And I was like, this is not how we wouldn't treat an animal that way. If you knew a dog was locked in a room for 15 years and only given food and a place to poop, we would not treat a dog that way, but we treat humans that way. So I did a case for him, and I did a lot of cases for people who were detained in Eloy in Florence.
Wow. So you were a volunteer as well in an orphanage in Uganda?
Yes. You know so much about me. Oh, my goodness.
Yes, I do.
I have no secrets.
I did a little digging.
Yes, I would say so. I have no secrets. Yeah, so when my husband was fighting in Operation Iraqi Freedom, we were living in Japan. He deployed to Iraq. And I didn't want to go back to Kansas, where I'm from originally. I wanted to, stay exploring the world. So I went to Uganda and lived on the second story of an orphanage for a couple of months. And most of the kids who I helped take care of had HIV, or their parents had HIV, or their parents had just really fallen on hard times. Some children were going to be placed back with their family. Their family just had really hard times financially. But most of the children, their parents had passed away. It was a transforming experience for me. Again, you think you're going to go help someone, but they are actually who change you.
What did you learn from that experience that changed you?
I learned that at the time, and I feel embarrassed saying this, but at the time I didn't realize how lucky I was to be a woman in the United States. So one of the women who I was volunteering with, she was a Ugandan woman. She was working. I talked to her a lot because we were taking care of the same group of babies. And she said that her big dream in life was to be a judge in Uganda. And yet that was kind of impossible in her mind. She was like, it's impossible. This will never happen. And I thought in my mind, like, I could easily, not to be rude, but like there are lots and lots of female judges in the United States. If I wanted to do that, I could do that. And realizing that I was 25, something like that, 25 years old, and I had the whole world ahead of me and I could truly do anything I wanted, that me being a female in Uganda would hold me back, but in the United States, it wouldn't. I was like, I need to go big. And that's when I decided I want to go to law school. I want to do perhaps what this woman dreams of doing, and it's an unrealistic dream. But I could just go do that. Like, how lucky am I? I should go make a difference in the world.
So coming back to immigration, what changes would you like to see implemented in the law sooner or later?
Yeah, if I could wave a magic wand, I would do two things. Thank you for this question. I've been wanting to tell everyone. So the first thing, I did a TED talk on this. Like, I am obsessed with this idea, is I think you should be able to self-petition rather than having someone else petition for you. So if you were my husband and I were undocumented, or even living in a foreign country, and I were just wanting to immigrate to the US, why is it that you have to petition for me? We're already married. I should be able to petition for myself and show that we are married. But instead, what our system does is it puts the power in the U.S. citizens' hands. Mm-hmm. And those U.S. citizens' hands, many times, not always, but many times, use it as a method of control. If I petition for you, you're going to leave me. If I petition for you, do you even love me, or did you just marry me for papers? Let's remove that from the conversation and just say the individual can petition for themselves after they have the required relationship. That's step one. There would be so much less abuse in the United States, especially within immigration, if we just made that one small change. The evidence would stay the same, the process would stay the same, but we would protect people by not creating an imbalance of power, because you give all the control to someone in the relationship and you're just setting people up for failure. So that's number one. And number two is I would get rid of the unlawful presence bars. So right now, if you come from Mexico and you're here for, let's say, for 5 years without permission, and then you want to leave because now you want to fix your status, you have to stay outside the US for 10 years. That's crazy. We have created a disincentive. We have disincentivized people from following the rules. We need to use carrots, not sticks. And the unlawful presence bar is a very big stick for Mexican families. You know, I don't know if it's, I think it's Latino families. But in the US, white families, we're not as close. I don't know what it is. I don't know why it is. But you talk about separating a Latino family, I'm just making an observation, that is a whole different thing. It's unthinkable. And that's something that we need to get rid of, is we need to get rid of these unlawful presence bars so that families can really be together. That's the point.
So in today's polarized environment, how can people with opposing views can find a common ground on immigration, the politics?
So anyone I talk to, once they hear a little bit about the reality of what immigration looks like, what the rules look like. They go, wow, that's crazy. I talked to a gentleman today and he was on the other side. And he said, look, I support immigration when it's done legally. I said, me too. Let me tell you what it is to do this legally. If I'm a U.S. citizen and I want a petition for my child who's over the age of 21, it's going to take about 15 or 20 years. That's the legal process. Same thing if I want a petition for my sister and I'm Mexican, she's Mexican, 20 years. Can you imagine 20 years just for this one petition? And that's after I'm 21 years old and can even petition for her. And he was like, I have never heard that before. I had no idea. And that's the conversation of, I had no idea. And then they always say, that's stupid. It is, my friend. The rules are stupid, and yet we want people to play by them. So I think that that's the way that we can all agree. If we make it impossible, what are we even doing?
The right way.
Yeah, the right way. And that's where I have to have a lot of compassion for people when they say, I want people to do it the right way. I want people to do it the legal way. Like, cool, me too. Do you know what the legal way is, though? And then we can have that conversation. 20 years is, think about what were we doing 20 years ago? I was like a teenager almost. That's crazy to think that that's how long these processes take. So anyway, people usually, you hear a couple of facts and they say, that's crazy. And I'm like, yes, this is why we need immigration reform.
Mm-hmm. So lastly, as a wife and as a mother of four, how do you balance your life between courts, visits to these facilities, and your family, your loved ones?
Yeah, so it used to, I'll be really candid, and the pandemic made it worse, but I used to drink a lot of wine because I was really stressed out. And that was not making me a better mom. It was not making me a better lawyer. And so now it's just a lot of drawing a boundary and saying, I'm done for today, and really being done. And now I'm with my kids, and I'm really, to the best of my ability, just with my kids. And I stopped giving clients my cell phone number because then I would text and talk to my clients more than my own children, because you really want to be there for people. So I think those are the important things. But I have a lot of faith. I really, really believe that I don't want to call them miracles, because I think that a miracle is something that happens once and never happens again. But maybe a formula. I really believe that there is a formula for success. Not everybody's case fits into the formula, but when we can, I really believe that we know how to make it work. And that gives me a lot of peace of mind and confidence in myself. And I think you need that as a lawyer.
Well, something else you want to add, Hillary?
No, thank you so much for having me. And I'm sorry that I didn't realize it was going to be in Spanish. I would have practiced a little bit. Thank you so much. And I appreciate the research.
No problem. Sorry about my bad English.
No, not at all. Are you kidding me? No, thank you so much.
Well, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias por habernos acompañado en este podcast. Los esperamos hasta la próxima. Se me cuidan. Bendiciones.